My name is Okalo Ikhena. I am from Nigeria, born and raised. I've been in the US for about 20 years. And fun fact, I become a citizen on Friday, next Friday. So excited. I am here on behalf of the team to talk about what I've been focused on for the last 5 years, and that is using AI to better understand the built environment so that we can imagine a better one. Our mission is to decarbonize and adapt the built environment for future generations. I have that underlined here because it's extremely important through intelligent geospatial design. And intelligent geospatial design is one which is holistic, quantitative, and transparent, and we'll go into a bit of detail as to why this is important and what we're doing about it. Today, 4.5 billion people live in cities around the world, and that's a good thing because the per capita GHG emissions for people who live in cities is lower than those who live in rural or suburban areas. If you think 4.5 is a lot, in 2050, it's going to be 7 billion people. That is 2.5 billion people moving to cities in the next 30 years. That is the equivalent of 200,000 people moving to cities every single day. The number of cities is going to double by 2050. And to do that, there's a lot of building that needs to happen. Just how much building? A lot of building. 13,000 buildings every single day. This does not include single-family homes. 13,000 buildings need to be built on average across the globe to make sure that people that move into cities have places to live, to work, to play, to go to school, to eat at restaurants, etc. And as you can imagine, that has a huge impact on GHG emissions. The built environment is 42% of global emissions. 28% of that is operational emissions, so the operation of the buildings when they've been built. The rest of it is from the actual building of those buildings. So thinking about the physical infrastructure, as well as the construction of the buildings themselves. From an adaptation perspective, the climate has already changed, and we are struggling to adapt, whether it is unprecedented flooding in Nigeria or Pakistan, or it's fires in Canada or in Hawaii. Cities around the globe are struggling to adapt with the implications of the changing climate. There's a multidimensionality to this impact, whether it's dozens of millions of people that are living with seasonal allergies or other sorts of respiratory diseases, 8 million people with premature deaths based on air pollution, or the economic toll of $8 trillion a year across the globe. So when you look at this, it's clear that as cities, communities, corporations, or individuals, we have to think about sustainability in the decisions that we make. But just how complex is a built environment decision? This is a narrowed down version of the complexity of making a change to the built environment. At the base, we have the constraints and context, political, social, regulatory, economic. We then have the urban systems that exist, whether it's the physical infrastructure around buildings, energy, transportation, or the social infrastructure around safety, health, belonging, and more. Then you think about the outcomes that you're looking to achieve. Yield and program, how much are you building and where are you placing it? The design priorities, what is the egress of the building? What is the circulation? What do the massings look like? The sustainability implications, both as part of the construction or the operation of those buildings. What are the financials? If it doesn't make money, it's not going to get realized. And then finally, what is the quality of life for people who actually live, play, work, and grow there? From these outcomes, you then have the smaller set of decisions that can be made, whether it's your building design, your neighborhood design, policy changes, community resources, the list goes on. Based on that, this last mid-journey to create this image, this is effectively the fingerprint of a particular design. It's the weighting of the different decisions you need to make, is the relationship between those decisions and other decisions, both on the site, but on the surrounding site context. And given that there's no two fingerprints that are alike, this is what the design space looks like. This is about 3,000 dots. Each one of these represents 1,000 options. When you think about the dimensionality of these decisions, the possibilities are endless. And as such, it takes a lot of time and a lot of money to come up with the best design. We live in a place where there's a lot of experts, there's a lot of access to computes, there's a lot of structured data, but most of the world does not have the level of expertise or access to computer data that Massachusetts or Cambridge has. And because of that, only 3% of development projects are holistically planned. This is not about whether or not the building has a floor plan. This is about whether it's taking into account the surrounding context, the short and long-term implications. That's what defines holistic planning, and that's a very small percentage of projects that are happening today. So when we think about democratizing access, it's not just about helping the 3% design better, it's really about helping the 97% have access to intelligent geospatial design. How do we do that? First, we need to connect the dots to better understand the built environment. And this is not just what is happening at Google, this is across the globe and across different sources. At the planetary level, AI imagery helps us build an inventory of what's going on in the built environment, whether it's where the roof and parking potential are for solar, where the flood risk exists, et cetera. Context is critical. Right now, we have regulatory documents that are spread out across different formats, very hard to find on the web. Turning those into structured data makes it easier for firms across the globe to better understand the constraints they have to navigate. Material constraints, capital constraints, regulatory compliance, other key elements, right? These are the things that you want to avoid running into from a roadblock perspective. So being able to design that holistically at the beginning is super critical. And then finally, I wanted to spotlight the data commons here, which provides a natural language way for everyone to better understand the behavioral trends of the spaces that you're in, whether it's around mobility, housing, economic opportunity, and more. Next, and this is my favorite part, we can then intelligently explore the design space. So what we have here are prompts, if you will, that represents the complexity of what you're looking to achieve. How do I balance getting this amount of square footage with minimizing the embodied carbon and operational carbon while taking advantage of regulatory incentives and making sure that it's a great place for people to live, play, work, and grow? By lowering the level of expertise required to ask these questions, we can bring more people to the table, so you don't need to have the deepest pockets or the loudest voices to participate in the design process. Then the model digs into the built environment library, whether it's buildings, open space, amenities, solar, electrification, use types, to identify the ideal mix, right? The ideal fingerprint of decisions that can achieve outcomes. And this is stuff that would take humans months, if not years, to do. We're able to explore the multidimensional space for what matters most, whether it's the solar savings or the experiences at the apartment level, the return on investments, the regulatory compliance. And this allows us to find the winning design at a much faster pace, as opposed to running into deadlocks and impasses. What's interesting about a model is that you can prompt it not just about the present, but about the future. How do we make it more resilient for future generations? How does this neighborhood hold up during a hurricane? How does this block hold up during a heat wave? An example of this is with tree canopy, where you place your trees in the built environment, determine what the temperature is on the ground plane, and when you overlay that with the existing population, you start to identify where comorbidities exist, where people start to die on the hottest days of the year. We can also ensure inclusive design. How does this neighborhood serve members of the community who are elderly, who are new parents, who may be living with disability, unhoused, or unemployed? The experiences I've outlined so far help empower decision makers across the ecosystem, whether that's cities and governments to create policy that incentivizes the right type of buildings. Private sector and decision makers can quickly iterate and come up with winning designs. Communities and neighborhoods can participate in the process versus just being recipients of the decisions made by the powers that be. And a community of experts can contribute to and consume insights from across the globe. And finally, this is not a virtual exercise. It's important that these things make it into the real world. So connecting an ecosystem of suppliers is an important part of bringing this to life. So it's been a very interesting 5 years, but the last 18 months, for many reasons, have been particularly exciting. Last year, we rolled out a self-service model where you can go into delve.startuplabs.com and generate designs. We integrated this with Google Earth last month, which has been extremely exciting. Thousands of projects around the world have been designed so far. That's over 3 billion square feet and 3x the landmass of San Francisco, just to give a sense for just how much has been designed using this capability. From an export perspective, we want to meet users and stakeholders where they are. with the formats that are important to them. So whether that's AutoCAD and Rhino for the designers, whether it's spreadsheets for the investors, or images for the storytellers, it's important that we provide the tools to users so that they can take things forward. Again, it's not a virtual exercise. And then finally, expanding the inventory of sustainable strategies, embodied carbon, reducing materials, solar panels, electrification, reducing VMT, and more. This is part of a growing group of efforts at Google. Google Earth, which we're part of, allows you to observe and orient the built environment and generate designs to make it better. Earth Engine provides those capabilities to developers to analyze, monitor, and protect the environment. The GMP environmental APIs provide critical information to consumers, whether it's through pollen, air quality, or solar, so that they can adapt to the changing climate. And then the Environmental Insights Explorer is really aimed at helping cities make thoughtful policies that help accelerate decarbonization and adaptation. I just want to take the last few minutes to highlight some of the things outside of geo. Super excited about contrails, which is understanding the environmental factors to identify the ideal altitude for planes to fly, to reduce contrails that trap heat in our atmosphere. Green light optimizes traffic to make sure there's reduced idling, which also is another source of emissions. And I highlighted data comments earlier, which provides a natural language way to understand the built environment. The potential for reduction is massive. By 2030, gigatons in reduction if we all work together. And by 2050, this is just a snapshot from Drawdown as to the amount of emissions reduction that can happen via buildings, energy, and transportation. We're just getting started. This is what we have so far in the model. This is a quote-unquote roadmap of things that we know are important. But the most important part is what we have there, which is the unknown unknowns. There's experts in this room, experts that may be watching elsewhere. We need to work together to identify what are the most critical elements of making the built environment more sustainable and make sure that we're not solving these problems in isolation, we're solving these problems as a community. And I'm going to end on this slide. Obviously, with the advancements in AI, this is a very exciting time to be alive, but also a very exciting time to be in this kind of work. And while the AI progress is a moonshot, I would say the most important moonshot we have is our planet. Thank you.